Hello, you're listening to a Heroes Welcome podcast, episode 25. Thank you so much for tuning in. My name is Wes. I'm here, as always, with Andrew. So how was your week in Overwatch?
It's been pretty good. I've had a lot of time to actually sit down and play a lot of characters that I don't normally play even. I picked up a little bit of Zarya, was playing her, and of course, I played some Torbjorn. Since we'll be talking a little bit about Torbjorn later on in this show.
Right.
So I give him his due time since I don't normally play a lot of Torbjorn, but I've been having a lot of fun. How's your week been treating you?
Pretty good. Definitely playing Zarya. You know, you can do a pretty good carry with Zarya. Pretty safe pick. You're going to want her on every map, pretty much, especially the King of the Hills, but a very good value character. And
she just does, normally there's certain tanks that do really well on offense and some that do better on defense. And I mean, there's definitely an argument to be made that she's very strong as an offensive tank, but she's also very strong as a defense too. I mean, you get those ultimates off and you just take the whole team out.
Right. Yeah, so Zarya and Tracer for me, those who I've been playing, a lot of Tracer. I feel like, I could, I don't want to say carry my team but that's pretty much what I'm thinking. But, the impact with Tracer is pretty high.
Yeah,
and,
I played some Tracer as well too. Of course, I'm not quite as good with Tracer as I am with some of the others, but I go on some pretty good runs. I get some pretty good plays with the Tracer. So.
Right, yeah. So we have a pretty good show, right? Like you said, we're covering Torbjorn. He's actually the last hero, so we've covered all the heroes.
Right.
Today.
So this will be our final character summary. So anybody who wants to write us in and kind of give us some ideas on what you might like to see later on the show. I know we have a few ideas on what we might be doing, but of course any input is good, so you can definitely write us in.
So if you want to have us talk about a certain thing and the strategy, we'd definitely love to hear from you.
Any questions you might have, maybe something that we can answer that you're not getting answered on the forum boards and such, or anything like that you'd like us to break down, definitely you can always message us at aheroeswelcomepodcast@gmail.com is that email for us.
Right, and we're also going to talk about competitive. We always cover the competitive scene, quite a bit of changes. After you have a large tournament like the Overwatch Open, you're going to see some roster changes because, typically your roster locked for that, duration. So pretty exciting things going on there and some pretty big news, right?
Yeah, we got maybe a little sneak peek at some stuff you might have or might not have heard about. So, you'll definitely want to pay attention, and we're going to talk a lot about some very interesting news coming around.
Right, yeah, a little Blizzard leak that just came out from this recording just like within 24 hours. So pretty exciting stuff. So we get to speculate about, what's this mean? When's it going to come out, kind of thing. So pretty exciting. So let's jump into the news real quick. So we did have a developer update. I love these, obviously, being a content creator. This gives us a lot of content to work with, right? But pretty much Jeff Kaplan, he runs a show for the most part, and he goes on video and talks about the state of the game, right?
He has been doing this quite often, and he comes on and he just talks a little bit about what's going on, where they're currently at, and he just gives a lot of insight into what's going on inside Blizzard, specifically with the Overwatch team and what they're thinking about. So this time it was a lot more geared on, what they're currently working on, which I love because, obviously as content creators, we're always looking at, the future and what's going to be happening around the corner, and this gives us some really good insight into what they're thinking about moving on into the future.
Right, so he talked about some general things, right? So the voice lines, some new voice lines coming out, some new emotes, and maybe changing the interface and maybe how we use those, maybe using multiple, emotes or lines at a time.
Right, so, being able to maybe just equip an emote or a line or even equipping multiple and be able to use them at the same time or whatnot. So definitely looking forward to more voice lines and emotes coming into the future. That's a pretty simple thing. I mean, it's something that I'm sure they will be able to get out relatively quickly with that, but also some hero updates as well.
Right, and he did actually point out pretty early in the video that, some things, are going to be coming out relatively early. Some things are further down the line, and some things may never even come, to light because that's kind of how game development works. Sometimes you work on something.
I mean, specifically with, new content, especially with a game like this where, everything from the heroes to the maps and modes and such like that, they so heavily rely on one another. You can't make a map without having to think about all the characters, not just one of them, how they fare on the map. Is it broken for one character or not for another, that sort of thing. So, yeah, as usual, some things are going to happen relatively quickly and some things may not ever happen. So
right, so Kaplan talked a little bit about some hero updates. These are going to be pretty relatively, soon added to the game. We've talked quite a bit about some already. They're on the PTR. So the Widowmaker scope and animation we talked a little bit about. It's going to be a little bit faster. The Widowmaker players are going to like that, just a lot more smooth, more like the sniper we already have in the game now.
Right, and as far as Widowmaker in the past, we had that whole animation canceling, which Blizzard did get rid of, and I mean, I think we're both on the same page. We both really like the animation canceling. It's a really cool niche thing that people can pick up on, and it really delineates between good players and great players, but they wanted to make it pretty level across the board, so that's why they got rid of the animation canceling. And this result of them changing the animation time is kind of as a reaction to having to do that. So they got rid of the animation canceling, but they're still trying to make it to where she's much faster scoping in and out, give her a lot more viability in that way.
Yeah, so to be specific, the animation we're talking about is the scoping animation. It's going to just complete a little bit quicker and it just makes them, more tight. Obviously, Widowmakers are on the move. You want to scope in and out pretty relatively quick.
Right, and you want to make sure you have that line of sight to get that kill. You don't want to have to go to scope in and now the person's completely gone. Farrah, she flew up in the air or something like that. You want to have it relatively quickly. So I mean, from about a half a second to 0.3 of a second, much quicker. And it doesn't seem like a lot, but trust me, you can check it out currently on the PTR, and it is quite a difference.
Right, and we did learn that Symmetra is going to be getting some pretty large changes. So I don't expect like massive, complete different hero. I expect her to still have the teleporter. He talked quite a bit about, we don't want her to be a healer. Don't expect her to be healing. They really like, the idea and the character. They develop the idea of it.
Right, the design behind her they really like, and I like it as well. And I'm really happy that they're kind of sticking to their guns on this. Like you said, they're much happier to move her to the defensive side than to make her a healer, which I prefer. I don't think she needs to move to defense, but I mean she could very well move to defense. But I like that they're sticking to their guns with her, and they're going to rework her kit. But they're not going to get rid of her design. They're going to keep her very much the same. So I like that idea.
Yeah, and the problem they're trying to solve is she's extremely situational. On their ends, their numbers are showing very good win rates. But they're showing very good win rates because if you're staying on Symmetra for any amount of time, you're probably steamrolling the other team on defense on point A. And that's why she has such a good high win rate. But yeah, they're trying to make her so she's less situational. I don't know exactly how they plan on doing that, but, they've been doing a great job. And I expect, they'll have a solution, and can't wait to try that out. Probably on the PTR first,
Yeah, we'll definitely, I'm sure, see it on the PTR first. They did specifically say, that we probably won't see anything until mid-November with her, since they are going to be doing a lot of internal testing, which is great because, that's really where they're going to be able to, sew things up really nice before they hand it off to us at the PTR. That way, we can kind of get a real, good idea of what she's going to look like in the future and how she feels. I mean, I could just think back to, the D.Va changes with her defense matrix. I mean, they did such a great job of how they went about making D.Va stronger and not just upping certain numbers with her, damage and such. So
yeah, you also talked about Junkrat, which we've discussed already, how Genji will actually get trapped if he tries to, shift through a trap. If he dashes, and the ultimate Riptire, the activation speed up, it's a little bit quicker, so you're not as vulnerable. We've seen that, it's on the PTR, but these are just changes that he's been talking about.
Right, so those are previous changes, that we've kind of heard about. I know we've talked about on this show. I think the last in the previous episodes we talked about it. So those are kind of things we've already expected coming down the line. They're in PTR right now, and you can check them out. The Junkrat trap changes. It's not a huge thing, but it definitely makes a really good change to Junkrat's viability against someone like a Genji. And the Riptire is immensely better. I mean, just having that activation much faster, it makes it a lot easier for Junkrat to just get those Riptires off and actually make some, actual effort with that.
Right, and he did allude to some new heroes coming in the future. So we all know about Sombra. We've been hearing about her. We pretty much assume that she's going to be the next one, but he did mention, there's other ones in internal testing, maybe early 2017 timeframe. I'm sure BlizzCon, is right around the corner, and we'll learn a lot more about future heroes.
Right. So as usual, we kind of have, some heroes could be possibly coming sooner, some way later in the future. And of course, I'm sure they're already working on stuff that may never make it in, but definitely looking forward to any new content.
Right. And they're talking about some new maps they're designing, right? So he did say that one of the maps is, a familiar mode that we're familiar with. And there's also like a new prototype. So it could be pretty interesting. Obviously, adding diversity to the game is going to help with it, never getting stale. And I was talking to a buddy, maybe we'll get to a point where we start having to like rotate maps out of the pool. There's a whole bunch of them, but Nothing but excitement. I'm sure, same thing with BlizzCon, I'm sure we'll see some of these new maps.
Right. So specifically, he did say that there's one new map that is really far along that will obviously be coming, soon, as usual. But then there is another map that is kind of in the prototype stage. It's very far off, but it's also both of those are existing modes, competitive and quick play, and just the straightforward modes. But then they also have, I think he said, around 4 new maps that are all in prototype, very far off. I mean, they're using old, materials and stuff for those maps, but 4 maps that are very far off, but they are all new game modes possibly. So possibly we can see a new game mode pretty relatively soon in the game. But of course they could also never make it into the game as usual. And they are of course actively working on new game modes he spoke about as well.
Right. So pretty much it seems like they'll have an idea for a map and they'll just use old assets and kind of throw it together. Then once they get into the point where they're actually making new content, new assets for that map, you kind of know like, okay, this is actually going to be done. They're committed to this, and it's probably going to be closer to the pipeline to get finished.
Right. I mean, anytime they're actually creating assets, I mean, that's going to take a lot of time and work for them to do that. So, of course, they're not going to start building new assets until they are very confident in the map. And, ultimately, they talked about in the past that, with maps, they do rigorous internal testing because of the fact that, like I said, we have, quite a few heroes that have to be considered in all options and make sure that, it's not broken for one hero and, the layout and design of the map doesn't need to be changed drastically.
Right, and lastly, he talked a little bit about the spectator updates. We've talked a little bit about it, but pretty much you have static cameras, cameras that are able to follow objectives. So you could say, always follow the payload, and it'll be a fixed camera always there. The spectators, we don't see much of this unless we're organizing tournaments and stuff. But BlizzCon's around the corner. Obviously, it'll get a lot of play. Obviously, pausing the game. There's been some discussion about whether that'll come to competitive play and will people abuse it and so on and so forth. There's a whole discussion there.
Right. So yeah, specifically with the cameras. So bookmarking cameras, you can be able to set up static cameras anywhere you choose on the map and be able to hotkey back to them at any given moment, which is awesome. And then you'll have cameras that are focused on the objective. So even if they're static or not static, they will turn and look and face the object, and even as well as heroes as well. So even if you have a static camera, say on the payload, and something's going on with say the tracer or whatnot, you can have it focus the tracer in that spot as well, or it can follow the person. So it just opens up the range of things that people can do as far as broadcasting and such. So awesome news.
Right, and thanks Kaplan so much for doing these things. Definitely looking forward to the future ones. And the transparency, just the communication, the community feedback, and actually seeing someone actually take that in and add it to the game. And I think it means a lot, and I think it does reflect the popularity and the success of the game ultimately.
Oh, definitely. I mean, you can just think of any other game in the past that has been where Overwatch is at and kind of new in the scene and kind of trying to push for more as far as both the esports side of things and as well as popularity. And just something like this, it just really gives the credibility from the devs point of view and such that they're actually putting in this effort to sit down and make these developer updates. It really shows that they are really trying to push and be open and give as much feedback and information to the players as they can.
Right, so let's talk about the leak, right? So from this recording, this came out last night, so pretty new. Obviously, it looks pretty credible, otherwise we wouldn't really be covering it. But we've seen some other things like, oh, here's a Sombra or whatever, and it's that doesn't really look accurate maybe. But
yeah, there's one thing you can say about Blizzard is, of course, they have a unique style and way of doing things, and what's important to note is they do things very, very well, and they make sure that they do it to the best of their ability. So everything that they put out is top-notch, from the audio to the art assets, just the way that they do it, and they have a specific stylized art specifically for Overwatch. And of course, we've seen plenty of other supposed leaks and things like that out there, and just the art assets and stuff were not up to par with Overwatch and with Blizzard. So this seems to be much more credible.
Right, so there's a number of things to talk about a little bit. Let's start with Sombra, right? So everyone's been talking about Sombra. She's obviously we know she's kind of like a hack character where she's into hacking, female. We don't know much about her. She's like a shadow. So we did get an image of her. She's holding like an Uzi looking type of weapon. There's some text that let us know that she has some history with Los Muertos and Talon, so maybe more of a antagonist, maybe.
Right, she's definitely one straddling the line. I mean, let alone the fact that she's a hacker. She's not necessarily on the quote unquote hero
There's good
side
hackers,
of things.
though. Good hackers.
There are good hackers out there. So I mean, but she's definitely on that razor line. She has, like we said, affiliation with Los Muertos, which is the gang, and Talon as well, which is obviously not on the side of the heroes of Overwatch as well. So just some news coming out from her. I mean, specifically, like I said, Blizzard has been teasing this for quite a while, so it's kind of a surprise the way that this kind of all broke. But yeah.
Yeah, so it's pretty much just a screenshot of her in game. She's in front of like the Numbani background.
Yeah, it's like the character select screen. I mean, if you go to the character select screen, you can see any character. You can be on the select screen. You can Alt Z and get rid of the UI, which is what you're basically looking at with Sombra. And I'm sure you can find it. It's all over the internet right now. But you got a specific spot, specifically where the character kind of sits on the character select screen. It's a little bit off to the right hand side. It's not directly in the middle. And of course, you have the Numbani in the background.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like a character Blizzard would design. I mean, it looks accurate. And some other interesting things is it kind of seems, because we talked about this last week, right, where it was like, oh, BlizzCon's coming out. That's probably when Sombra will get announced and maybe playable. But it kind of seems like she might be playable with the Halloween patch, which we're expecting really soon. I mean, maybe even this week.
Right, so it's one of the things that we also kind of got leaked, as well as this Halloween event that everybody's kind of been talking about. So we did get some more information on that as well, that kind of came with Sombra, which might lead us to believe that she'll be coming out sometime with that event, which, like you said, could be as soon as early next week.
Yeah, maybe even this week. Yeah, and there was like a screenshot of I think on Xbox there was a leak where it was like, oh, the loot boxes. We don't really know if it's going to be the same as the summer games where you could purchase crates. Probably be something like that. But there was kind of artwork in the Microsoft side of things, and there's like some candy with it was Overwatch themed, and looked like there was actually a Sombra kind of related little candy in the basket there. So I mean, it looks from what we see now, it looks like Sombra's going to be with this next patch.
Yeah, she very well could be, or it could be, very shortly in the future here. But we know definitely we've got our first sneak peek at Sombra, so we get to see what she looks like. She looks very interesting. She definitely follows that artistic style of Overwatch, so it does, like we said, look very credible. This does not look to be a hoax of sorts. So yeah, it definitely looks very good, and I'm definitely looking forward to seeing how she plays.
Yeah, and it also has some text on there kind of talking about a zombie omnic kind of survival game mode. I mean, I know in other FPSs there's kind of like endless survive modes. That's kind of what it sounds like to me, right? There's like different difficulties and some credits. Some type of currency that you get. Maybe you could get Halloween themed rewards and not have to spend real money on it, maybe.
Right.
Hopefully.
So it says points. So whatever that's going to mean, we're not quite sure yet. But they're going to be points given depending on the difficulty level. So yeah, it definitely sounds like some sort of endless zombie. So it reads, protect the castle from the Zomniks and Dr. Junkenstein's evil allies. And of course, we've said that it will be depending on the difficulty level. So I mean, this very well could be, like the summer games kind of thing. And if it does well, it could make its way into the game. It could just be a brawl. We don't have any credible information on that yet, but yeah, it definitely looks to be some sort of endless zombie survival.
Yeah, I'm sure as soon as we finish recording this, all the information will come out and it'll be
yeah, everything's gonna break as soon as we release this. Everybody's gonna be finding out about it, I'm sure.
But let's talk about Dr. Junkenstein, right? So that's Junkrat. What also got leaked was like a cover of another comic, right? They have the online comics that we've seen in the past. So it looks like they have a Halloween-themed one. And it looks really, really interesting. But yeah, all the characters are dressed up. And we knew we were going to get like that Mercy witch kind of skin because, there's pictures of her from, months and months ago. And maybe like a Viking Torbjorn, we knew some of them. But yeah, so we see some new ones, Junkenstein being Junkrat, kind of like the guy that makes Frankenstein or whatever.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, it definitely looks really interesting. And it's not just the cover. There's actually some of the pages internally as well. So we did see a little bit of everybody kind of dressed up there. We see McCree and Soldier 76 as well, all dressed up for Halloween. And I mean, they did an amazing job, and it looks really good. I mean, we talk about the Overwatch comics in the past, and they've done such a great job. But this one really looks cool. I mean, Halloween, I feel like is a very easy thing to play off of. Of course, you got costumes, and you got the whole Halloween thing going on. So, I they did a really great job though. So Junkenstein, and then I think we have like Roadhog playing the Frankenstein, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah, and it looks like Genji was a pirate, a little pirate hat.
Yeah, he was a little pirate. You have Soldier 76 dressed up in his his Evil Knievel outfit as well. So yeah, I mean, definitely they did a great job. All the characters look really good, and it looks like a pretty awesome comic. I think what they have it's Reinhardt is the storyteller of the story, so he's kind of sitting on his throne there, giving the story of Halloween to the kids. So.
Right. Yeah. So pretty much, we're obviously expecting a big patch for Halloween, probably this week. Obviously, these kind of events, span probably about a month or so, and right now would be a great time to release that for Halloween, obviously. And so, you're gonna have new skins, probably new, all this stuff, right? The voiceovers and the cinematic kind of stuff. Definitely something to look forward to. I'll be trying to grab that. I mean, obviously, probably next year and every year around this time, those rewards will be available. But, they'll only be available for a short period of time. And hopefully we don't have to spend real money to get those loot crates.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely interesting we'll see exactly how they want to do that. And I'm sure, like you said, certain content will, come back and be available next Halloween, I'm sure. But I'm sure there'll be some things that maybe won't be available next Halloween, which I kind of like having the exclusivity of some things, which is kind of cool. But, Blizzard does such an amazing job, specifically with, holiday themes and stuff like that in their game. It's almost like, as much as I've been playing Blizzard games in the last, 5-10 years or so, it's almost like if Blizzard games didn't exist, I might not know what holiday it was. There's certain holidays like Halloween that I don't get all dressed up usually and go do Halloween anymore. So if it wasn't for Overwatch, I probably wouldn't even realize it's Halloween.
Right, and I'm looking forward to it for sure. The Mercy skin looks pretty cool. Little Viking for Torb looks pretty sick. I mean, it's gonna be, nothing but really cool new stuff to play with.
Yeah, Blizzard does such an amazing job. I'm definitely looking forward to it. So definitely, and I guess we can jump right into competitive now.
Right, yeah, so let's start with Cloud9, right? So a lot of news with them.
Yeah, a lot of little hoopla with them. I know, after, everything happened with the most recent tournament, a lot of people were talking about, what's going to happen with Cloud9 and such. So we got a little bit of information on their roster.
Right, yeah, so we've already seen them compete in a couple tournaments. So pretty much they have some new players playing with them. And the way they said it from the players is pretty much it's kind of like they're testing out some players, right? But, these players we're very familiar with. We have like Wolf, Mendo, and Rib or RYW. RYB.
Yeah, so definitely very familiar. If you paid attention to Overwatch, esports or tournaments at any time in the past, you've heard these names: Rib, Menakusai, and Wolf. Obviously, big names. Speaking of, Menakusai is probably one of the bigger ones. So they're no slouch for sure. They hopped right in. They've done great work from the start. They had a little bit of a rough start in their first matchup in the Alienware Monthly Melee, but they got right back into it. But so previously the three other rosters of Cloud9, Debit, Grego, and Reaver, have left Cloud9. They are no longer with them, but they're just trying out Rib, Menakusai, and Wolf, and we'll kind of see how things go. Nothing is set in stone yet.
Right, and we'll cover the events, shortly, really quick. But the new roster is definitely looking really good for them. You have to realize that there's certain things in Overwatch which everyone kind of gets to a level where they understand the basic fundamental things, but you are playing with teammates that are new to you for the first time, right? So so they've been very successful with this new roster with very minimal practice time.
Right. So, right after, the major tournament, they didn't have any time. They had to invite these three new players to kind of join them for the monthly melee. And, their first match, they kind of looked pretty lackluster against Liquid. But, of course, Liquid's been playing for quite a while together. They have a really good team going on. So, they were 0-2, against Liquid the first match of the night. But pretty quickly, they went up against Rise Nation 2-1 and, 2-0 straight across the board to Selfless. So they did a great job picking it up later on in the night. And I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about specifically the players themselves, the three new players, and what you thought of their play of the night.
I do like Mendo. He's one of the actually pros that stream quite often for a pro in Overwatch. We don't get that much streamers, or at least pro streamers in Overwatch scene. So Mendo, I do check him out when I can. He's a really cool guy. He's usually playing the DPS role. He's able to play quite a bit of heroes. Very, very strong. Obviously, they picked up Wolf. He plays support. You see him on Zenyatta a lot, right?
Right. So, I mean, the only thing with Menakusa is, like, I kind of felt like, they already have Surefour on Cloud9, who does an amazing job on, usually the, DPS, and as well specifically on the non-projectile, the hit scan. So they had Mendo on the projectile. He played some Genji. He played some of the other characters. And the only thing that I saw in the first couple of matches that they played, it looked like Menakusa was still kind of getting to grips with, playing the projectile. I think most of the time I see him streaming, he's streaming, the hit scan as well. So I think that's definitely something new for him. So that kind of, I think, played into a lot of how they did that night as well. So Wolf, I mean, he did a pretty good job. I mean, he was playing support, he was playing Zenyatta. Probably not his best night overall, but I mean, like we said, they're still trying to get time together to play together and gel. Rib or RYB, I mean, he did probably the best of the three of them. I mean, he was on that Winston, and he was pretty, quiet, but he was definitely making some noise for sure, playing some big plays with that Winston.
Right, and I think it's an extremely strong lineup. I mean, Surefour, talked about in the past, I think he's definitely, one of the best players, especially in a scene. But, I mean, even, worldwide, I think he's definitely one of the best players. So I think this lineup definitely has potential, really, really good potential, and definitely looking forward to what they have in the future. And, Cloud9's, they've, I mean, as an organization, they've always had a pretty good, position, pretty good players on the team. So,
yeah, and not just in Overwatch, but I mean every game that they're in, that they're playing at a high level, they've always done really well. So I think obviously we can have some faith in Cloud9, and I'm sure this team will gel together. If they decide to stay with Cloud9, Menakusai, Wolf, and Rib, I think they definitely have a very strong composition. It'll just be a matter of whether they actually like playing with each other, and if they think it's worth pursuing. So we're definitely looking, keep you guys up to date on that kind of stuff, and we'll look to see what happens in the future.
Right, so we also found out that Reunited, they finally found the sixth man for their team. Is that what happened?
Right, so they were looking for the sixth man for quite a while. They did just recently have some changes to their roster as well. They picked up, I think, a couple of people as well. And finally, their sixth person, the Norwegian, I believe it's Onigod, who's placed in KYB. Replacing. So, I mean, he's relatively young. He's only 19. He's been on a couple other teams previously from the Nordic area, and he just recently made the jump to Reunited, and we're looking forward to seeing what he can do. I mean, he is relatively young, but he's pretty good. I've watched him a little bit in the past, and he's a really high-rated player. He's on that tank of that DPS usually on like the Zarya or the McCree. So
yeah, so it looks like he has a pretty good hero pool as well. I mean, it's a good trait to have. I think a lot of people have, the idea of like, oh, I'm going to main McCree or I'm going to main Winston, and that's not all I'm going to play. But this kind of game, you have to be able to react, right, to your enemy competition.
Right, especially at a high level of play where these guys are playing at, they definitely have to have a hero pool. If you're just playing, even if you only have like one of each class, it's not going to work very well. You have to have multiple people to be able to counter. You can't specifically just main one person. So yeah, having a big hero pool definitely makes a difference.
All right, so we can start going over some of the tournaments that happened this week, right? So in Korea, they had the OG and Overwatch Apex. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Right. So I put this in there because we always like to, kind of give a shout out and mention, some of the tournaments, specifically ones that are not relatively known or ones that are just starting up. So, Korea obviously finally kind of coming into Overwatch, and this is like one of the first major ones that we've seen from Korea. So it looks to be a pretty exciting tournament.
Right, and is that right? $180,000 US?
It's about, yeah. I mean, they're obviously they're in
money.
won, in Korean money, so it's quite a bit. 180,000. That is the total of the prize pool. Obviously, that is not given to one team, but yeah, it is quite a large amount.
That's got to be the biggest in Korea so far.
Yeah, it's definitely the biggest in Korea. It's a pretty sizable amount even here in U.S. But so they did have, it's the main qualifiers, online and offline stages. Top 64 from the online advance to the offline stage, and then that gets whittled down to 12 teams that will advance to the main event, and that's currently where we're at right now. We're at the 12 qualified teams, and then they're going to have 4 invited teams as well, and those will whittle down to 4 team round robin groups, and those top 2 out of each 4 groups will then advance to the playoffs.
Right, so historically, Korea hasn't had like a major play within FPS game esports. Do you think maybe Overwatch could be the the game for them?
I definitely think it could be very big in Korea. I mean, it's one of those games that kind of bridges the gap. I mean, we've talked about that in the past. It does it so well. There's been other games in the past that have tried it and, have done all right. Or, there's some that have just outright failed. But, with Blizzard doing things as they normally do, taking this whole genre and kind of making it their own, they've done such an amazing job of making this not just an FPS game, but making it a game about, teamwork and about player composition, and that really plays, I think, to its strength.
Yeah, I remember about a month ago or so, we got some statistics coming from the PC banks in Korea. So that's a reflection of, what games people are playing, and it did surprisingly well, like better than any game has, especially for a new game.
I mean, it overtook League of Legends for quite a while there, which is, big time.
That's a big feat. Yeah, nothing was even contesting, and not even close.
No, not even close. So, I mean, great feat. I mean, obviously, Korea is definitely all in on Overwatch. I'm sure we will see a lot more of them in the future. So, definitely take a look at the OGN. You can go onto the website. We'll have that link in the show notes as well. And you can check out and see how the Koreans are looking at Overwatch.
Right, so we also have the Alienware Monthly Melee happen on the 8th of October. They have a $5,000 prize pool. These smaller tournaments are definitely very vital and critical to a good, healthy sports scene, for up-and-coming players to, play with, sometimes with the bigger boys, sometimes come to play, but it's always fun to watch. It's always good to see some new and upcoming talent. So do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Right, so the Alienware Monthly Melee, the reason specifically I put this on there, because we were just talking about Cloud9 and their recent, roster change possibly. We'll see how that goes. And they actually took it home. They actually did really well in the later evening. So, I mean, they had a pretty good road. I mean, they went through some good teams. They went through, FaZe 3-0. They did finally come and take out Liquid 3-0, and then even Complexity as well in the finals. So they did an amazing job. The three new players, they didn't even seem to be phased by that. I think they did a really good job. So
yeah, and there were some pretty good games. I did catch definitely the finals there. Some pretty good stuff. Some pretty, very, very close matches too, by the way.
Yeah, there were some close matches. I mean, I think, the two that you probably definitely want to check out, Liquid versus Complexity in round 1. And again, Liquid and Complexity in round 4 was kind of a back and forth. Liquid took the first round. Then when they actually met again in round 4, Complexity actually taking it. And that got them to, face off against Cloud9 in the finals. So.
Yeah, I think there was another tournament in Europe, right? It's a Fight Arena Overwatch.
Right, so the Fight Arena in Overwatch in Europe, it is a $6,000 prize pool, and right now we're kind of waiting for the second qualifier. So they had kind of two separate qualifiers. They had the open qualifier that took place October 3rd through the 6th, and one team out of that qualifier actually is going to go straight to the grand finals in Paris at Paris Games Week. And right now we're currently waiting October 10th through the 12th. The pro qualifier is going on, so it's going to be 8 teams single elimination, and the one single winner will actually go on to meet the other team from the open qualifier at Paris Games Week, and that will be in Paris. 2 teams going head-to-head in Paris. LDLC is the one that actually qualified through the open qualifier, so we're just waiting to see who will be facing them in Paris.
Yeah, it's nice to see Overwatch, getting put on stage in all the different events worldwide, and I think it was $6 in space money. Their currency, right?
Yeah, definitely about $6 in space money. That's what it looks like, at least. But yeah, I mean, definitely a good event. I kind of like that they went with the main event is going to be in Paris. They had online and open and pro qualifier. So you had a completely open qualifier, then a single elimination pro qualifier. And LDLC doing a great job. They went through some good teams in Seizure and in Tilt. T for Tilt, who we've seen in the past, and they did a really pretty commanding job 3-0 versus them.
So how do you think Overwatch is for like a spectator perspective at these little game shows and stuff? Do you think it's pretty hype? Do you think a lot of people are there,
Oh,
really
yeah. I mean, I watch it online on Twitch all the time, and, all the tournaments that are going on, even the smaller ones, the Ghost of Gamer weeklies and such, and they definitely can get pretty hyped. I mean, there's all those closing moments, especially on, like, payloads, or even, at the, just super hype for moments when, two well-known players are going at it and they're kind of going back and forth. I think of, Sure4 is a really good one as well. And even Mendo that we've seen in the past, they make things very interesting. That's for sure.
Right, and the last one we just want to cover real quick is the Dino PC #1 Overwatch Challenger.
Right, so we talked about this in the previous episode, and we kind of wanted to bring it back and update you guys on what's going on so far. So it's the Dino PC Overwatch Challenge #1, and it is the grand finals we talked about before. That is going to be in the Dino PC headquarters in London, and it's going to be a best of 5, and that is coming Monday, October 31st. So we definitely look forward to that. So it's going to be NWA, Ninjas with Attitude, I believe, versus T for Tilt in the grand finals. And they both had a pretty good road. I mean, T for Tilt going through some really good teams, and they even actually met NWA previously. And so it's very interesting. They 0-2 versus the Ninjas with Attitude. So we'll have to see if they can come back and take that money back from them.
Right, and I'm sure on our, it's going to take place at the end of the month, but, we'll definitely keep you up to date how that pans out. So did you want to jump into our strategy segment, talk about Torbjorn?
All right, it is time. Yes, the final character summary that we're going to be doing on Torbjorn. He is our defensive character. He has 200 health on par with, very many other heroes as well. But Torbjorn is a very interesting character.
Right. I think he's very viable, especially in the lower to mid range. I think people would be actually surprised if they actually gave him a chance. You see a lot of Genjis flying around, a lot of Tracers. A lot of them struggle with the level 2 turret, pelting them all the time.
Well, I will tell you this much. Like I said, I do not play a lot of Torbjorn usually, but I did give him his due this last week and such, since we are talking about him in the show, and I was very surprised. I have obviously gone against Torbjorns. I've played Genji a lot previously in the beginning, and, obviously I kind of wrote him off like a lot of people did. I don't like to see people, especially on, first point defense and, payload and stuff like that, using Torbjorn. But I was actually really surprised with his damage potential and just his overall, utility as well.
Right, so let's break down his kit, talk all about him. So he does have a rivet gun weapon. He is one of those characters who do have a alternate fire as well as a primary fire. So his primary fire, just a normal shot. He does have 18 ammunition. It's going to do about 70 damage. It will have some sort of fall off. So some, medium-ish range, you'll have some fall off. You can fire 1.6 rounds per second, and it takes 2 seconds to reload. A little bit on the longer side for the reload, but quite a bit of ammo there, 18.
Right, so his normal shot actually, it does have some fall off like you mentioned, but it's really in the mid to long range. He does have a pretty decent range with that primary fire. Now, next we're talking about his alternate fire, and that, of course, is a charge shot. It's more of kind of like a shotgun. You're going to want to be using that at close range. Even that, I was kind of surprised. It does have a decent range on it. It's not quite like a Reaper or something like that where you have to be really up close. But yeah, it is more of a shotgun. Same 18 ammo, but it does use 3 per every shot, and it does around 62 up to 150 with, like I said, mentioning fall off at about a rate of 1 1/3 per second, rounds per second with a 2-second reload.
But yeah, it does pretty good damage. Almost probably Reaper damage on the right click. Very, very good damage.
Almost, yeah. I was very surprised. Like I said, I have played against Torbjorns in the past, and I have got one-shotted with that alternate shot, that charge shot before, and I was very surprised by it. So.
Yeah, and the primary attack does have, it's not a hit scan, right? So there is actually some fall off. Not just the damage, but the actual projectile itself.
Right, so there's a little bit of a fall over time. It is a projectile, so it's definitely something you have to keep in mind with Torbjorn. Good Torbjorn players will obviously be able to lead that shot a little bit.
Right, and in addition to having both the primary and alternate fire, he does have a whole nother weapon at his disposal, right? A forge hammer, which you can swing at people's faces and do some damage. But
right.
You can also use it to repair your turrets.
Right, exactly. So its primary function is obviously to repair your turrets and to upgrade them, to level 2 as well, which is really where you want to get, which we are definitely going to be talking about. But it does do some melee damage. It is melee damage. It is about 75, so it's pretty good damage. It is more than, your standard melee on your character. So definitely you can use that in a pinch in a close area if you need to, or if you've already got it out and you just need to take somebody out, you can use that. But it is for the turrets repair, and it does do about 50 health repair per swing. And that is on the default on your keyboard. That is your 2 for picking up that forge hammer, and of course 1 for your rivet gun.
Right, and you could also use the mouse wheel by default as well. So yes, he has the hammer. So let's talk about the turret next, right? So you're able to put down a turret as Torbjorn. The turret itself has infinite ammo. It does have a health pool, so you can increase the health pool of that turret with your forge hammer, and you could also level it up It has multiple levels. It goes all the way up to level 3. And there has been some changes since beta and even since launch how this works. So pretty much you're able to put down a turret. You don't need any resources. We'll talk about the resources in a bit. But you could always put down that turret as long as the cooldown's available. And you could upgrade it to level 2 immediately. Just bust out the hammer. And you could also use the same hammer to repair it. So so pretty much you could use your shift by default in the PC to put down your turret and also use your hammer to upgrade it.
Right. So I think in the past, right, you had to have scrap even to put down even a level 1 turret, right? And then you needed scrap per level to level it up as well.
So do you want to talk a little bit about scrap and how you get it?
Right. So scrap basically drops off of both enemies and allies. So it is your resource. You do need to get scrap. And the importance of scrap is it's actually what we're going to be talking about next with the armor pack is what it's basically used for now. Previously, like I said, it used to be needed to just be able to even put down a turret or to upgrade a turret. But now it's basically only used for your armor. But it's still a very big deal because we've talked about previously armor is much better in health. It's even better than shields in a lot of sense. So I don't know. You want to kind of reiterate how that works exactly for armor?
Yeah, so real quick, if you kill your enemies, they drop these yellow glowy little gear things. That's
little cogs looking things.
Those are scraps. And you could accumulate a bunch of scrap.
And it's important to know you don't actually have to run over them. They actually auto, come to you. You just have to be within, I believe it's like 10 meters or so. So as soon as they drop and you're not full on scrap, which I believe is what 200 is your max
maybe
scrap.
Maybe a little bit more. Maybe 300. I'm not certain, but
yeah,
you do keep it when you die as well.
It is 200. So yeah, it's 200 scrap is your max. But if you don't have full 200 scrap, it will automatically just come to you if you're in range.
Right. So you do have the ability to produce armor for your friendlies, right? So, yeah, it takes about 50 scrap per armor, right?
Right, so 50 scrap per armor, and it's a 75 health armor that is going to be added to you. And, of course, as we mentioned in the past, it always goes to the right of your health. It's always taken up first before your health, and it actually mitigates damage, which is very useful. It's the only real way, other than abilities, to mitigate damage in the game.
Yeah, and because you do have that cap at 200 armor, once you hit the cap, you can just start throwing out armor packs on the ground, maybe at the point you're defending or something, and it will stay there for a whole minute, and so you get some more armor. And you can communicate that with your friendlies, right? Like, I just put a couple armor scraps on the point, especially for your healers. Let your healers know your mercies and stuff.
Right. Yeah. Communication with the scrap is very important because a lot of times in the heat of battle you don't hear it. So I play a lot of times, and anytime there's a good Torbjorn, he will definitely communicate that, and is very important. It's also important to know scrap does stay on the ground for a little bit of time. I believe it's about a minute scrap will last for. So if you don't have if you're capped out and you need to wait or something, you can just start spending that, and then you can collect the scrap that's already on the ground as well.
Yeah, and it's important to note that they've changed this in the past. So scrap is only used for creating armor packs.
Right. So like we said before, it's only used for armor packs, which is really cool because then you don't have to worry about it too much. You're going to get a healthy amount of scrap, and you can pretty much put those armor packs out relatively often, as obviously anybody can only pick up one 75 armor, and then of course if that depletes, they can pick up another to heal that. That is the way that they can pick up more, but they're going to be maxed at that 175 armor. It's not going to go above that.
Right, and so we talked a little bit about the turrets, right? So you don't need scrap to build it, but the way they change that is you're going to need to pop your ultimate to get that level 3 turret. So what happens with level 1 turret we could talk about? It does have 150 health, it does 28 damage, it fires 2 rounds per second, but typically, unless you're like really in a pinch, you're going to upgrade that to level 2 right away. It takes some hammers, it does double the health, it'll have 300 health. It'll do, pretty much double the damage. It's going to be firing twice as often, 4 rounds per second.
Right, and upgrading to level 2 is relatively simple. I believe it's only 5 hits with the hammer. It's really quick.
It's definitely an even number. It's probably 6 or 8.
Actually, I believe it's 5, but
I could be wrong.
Look into that. But yeah, I believe it's 5. But it's relatively quickly, and like I said, the difference is pretty dramatic. You have 150 health up to 300 health, so it's double the health. 28 to 57 DPS, and it's firing twice the rate of time as well, so 4 instead of 2 rounds per second. And then, as you mentioned, level 3 is no longer obtainable unless you're in your molten core.
Yeah, so the way this works is kind of confusing, right? So if you pop your ultimate and you have a level 2 turret, it'll automatically turn into level 3. Obviously, you don't want to really use your ultimate unless you have a turret down. But a few things happen when you ultimate, right? So you go into Molten Core, which is kind of a Warcraft reference. It lasts for 12 seconds. You're able to repair and build. at twice, 2 times speed, 100% faster. You're also going to increase your fire rate of, both your primary alternate attack. You're going to get a bonus armor to yourself, so you're going to be much more tanky. And like you said, that armor, it does not work the same as health. It has some built-in mitigation there, so it's even better than health.
Right, and it's important to note the one big thing with Molten Core is it's going to give you a bonus armor of 300. It's huge with that built-in mitigation. Now, that does not heal or refill your regular health. So if you're low on health, that it's just going to add 300 to whatever your current health is. But that's not just health; that's bonus armor, 300. So it has that built-in mitigation. Which basically, when Torbjorn pops Molten Core, it's unless you have an ult. You're probably not even going to want to ult on that. You're probably just going to have to wait out that Molten Core. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah, so it's kind of like Bastion. You get a bunch of armor, so you're much more tankier. Obviously, you're going to try to get good value out of it, have the turret down. But, if you don't have the turret down or maybe just got destroyed, you could still put down the turret and rebuild it. It'll automatically go to 3 as soon as you rebuild it. And it'll be very, very powerful. It gets rocket launchers at level 3, right? So it's shooting rockets. It has, the same... 4 rounds per second coming out of the regular little guns.
Right. So, you have, again, from 300 health drastically more to 800 health for level 3, as well as, 180 DPS. So it's still got those 2 guns, plus then it adds rockets to that, which it's about 5 rounds per second and about 4 rockets per second, which it's going to fire them in volleys of 4. So pretty nasty damage coming out from that turret. So if you're not protecting yourself when that Molten Core goes out, chances are you're not going to win that fight against that turret.
Yeah, I think it's important to point out that the turret does stay up even when you die. Sometimes you get those kills even when you're in the graveyard and rezzing. But, a lot of times what I find myself doing is, if you're in a big team fight, and maybe you got picked off early and your turret's still there, when you res and then you start seeing your turret take damage and it might die, you can just pop your ultimate, it'll automatically go straight up to 800 health and do tons of damage. And obviously, hopefully you're nearby so you can kind of join the fight yourself too. But it's just something to keep in mind. It does bump up to 800 health. It doesn't really matter how much health it had previous, and you can monitor the health of your turret, and you always want to know.
Right, it's in the bottom left by your character as well. You can see the health of your turret down there, so it's really easy to see. It's such a major ability, Molten Core. People that play Torbjorn really well make such great use out of it, and it's really the defensive character in that way. It can majorly turn battles around with that Molten Core.
Right, so now that we've covered all of his individual abilities and stuff, so let's talk about using all of them together, playing to his strengths, and exploiting those strengths so you could better increase your odds of winning. Right, so let's talk a little bit about. I mentioned it last time, but they did fix the. It wasn't really a bug; it was kind of an exploit, right, where people were able to swap between the hammer and their gun while they're building their turret to make it build faster. So that was obviously going to be a pro tip.
It's immediately the first thing that I went to. I was messing around with him in the game, and I was just like, oh, it doesn't work anymore, of course. But it's just kind of funny. I thought about it as soon as I started playing Torbjorn. So, yeah, they did take that away. Which,
yeah, it was a hot fix. Some people thought it was like an engine nerf or whatever. But really what was happening was people were able to upgrade the turret faster than intended because there's hot swapping between their rivet gun and the hammer. And obviously that kind of stuff isn't really intended. So they fixed that really quickly, but unfortunately, that's one less pro tip we're able to give you today. A lot of people don't know that, but pretty much every time you drop your turret, if you knew what you're doing, you would be doing this weird little switch between the weapons every time.
Yeah, I can tell you, I didn't see too much of that at the rinks that I was playing at. Obviously, I didn't see a whole lot of Torbjorns playing on where I was at unless they were really good. So I did see some good Torbjorns, definitely, but it's one of the things that not a lot of people knew about.
All right, so one of the most common mistakes a lot of new players make with Torb is where they put the turret, right? So a lot of times, what I look for the most importantly is putting the turret somewhere where you can repair it and yourself be safe, right? So if you put it near a pillar or near the edge of a wall or something, so you could be safe from line of sight while you're repairing your turret. So
that's very important. As you can imagine, you will definitely be repairing your turret quite often if you want to keep it up to level 2 and not have to keep redropping down a level 1 and upgrading it. It's very important, not just so that you can upgrade it, but then position as well. We talk about FOV or field of view is a big thing with Torbjorn and his turret. So you want to make sure not only that your turret has a good field of view, but you have a good field of view, and that you're going to be semi close to your turret. I've seen people put it, up above on high ground, which is really good for the turret, but then they're on the bottom and they're not able to get up to the turret relatively quickly, and that is such a poor placement.
Right, yeah, you could use a turret to like protect from flanks. It's obviously going to let you know. It's very audible, like it's shooting at people. You obviously want to put it somewhere where it has line of sight of the objective point, right? So talking about playing to your strengths, with Torb, he's probably like one of the most like defense dependent heroes in the game. I mean, even Bastion's probably better on defense, than him, just because you kind of need that setup time on defense. And obviously we've seen the turret on top of, the attacking payload. I mean, sometimes you see him on attack, and there's some examples of that, but his strength really is being able to scout out displays. Okay, put the turret somewhere advantageous where it has complete line of sight of anyone trying to take the point and probably the incoming, and being able to stand next to it and repair it. Obviously, you're going to want to be shooting enemies and stuff as well, but just protecting that, and especially if you're up against like a Pharah or someone that has long sight lines, you don't want it to be really easily picked off because obviously it's stationary.
Right, and in some situations, like we said, you want to be relatively close, but again, you don't want to be standing on top of the turret unless you're repairing it. It's important to note, one of the things that you probably want to take note of as Torbjorn is, other heroes and their abilities, and of course their weapons and their damage, so that you can know, like we said, per swing is about 50 health to your turret. So it's important to know if you're facing off against such, a character like a Pharah who's shooting rockets at you and your turret. One, you don't want to be standing on the turret when she's attacking it, and two, you're not going to be able to out heal that damage. It's probably a lost cause at that point. You're probably better off just shooting at Pharah yourself. So
right, and other things to be aware of, obviously Genji reflecting, because it's just an automatic shooting. You're not going to be able to just turn it off from shooting Genji, reflecting that. So that could kind of be dangerous, especially if it's like an like a level 3 turret. That could do some pretty big damage.
Yeah. Again, and then that point, you don't want to be standing on the turret because he's probably just popping it. Most people just pop the Genji Reflect, and they're not really aiming it. It's just going straight back at where it's coming from. So again, you don't want to be standing near that as well. And like I said, you just want to take note. I mean, that is the one good thing, Genji can get some range, but when he does get in close, unless he has that deflect up, he's a little vulnerable there because he's not got a huge health pool, and he's not going to be doing a huge amount of damage per shot. So,
right, and some other things to keep in mind. Obviously, higher ground in general is preferred, right? So some heroes that don't have like the ability to fly or verticality, they'll have much greater difficulty getting to it. Like a Tracer, for example, if you have it high up, it'll shoot her, but she might have to go around long way up the stairs just to even get close enough to even damage it.
Right, and then you have people like, Roadhog and Junkrat. Obviously, Roadhog being a tank, he's probably not chasing after or trying to go after the Torbjorn and the turret. So if it's up higher, he's not able to hook it easy enough. He doesn't have close range to be able to do max damage to it and take it out relatively easy. And of course, Junkrat, he excels at being above enemies, as we've talked about previously, and going upward and trying to deal with a turret that's placed higher on higher ground. It's very difficult for someone like Junkrat.
Yep, and the last thing about turrets is they do move on moving objects. So, the different levels where you have these moving panels, you could put the turret on them and it'll move with them. Obviously, payloads, we've always seen the bunker down, turret with the Reinhardt shield in front of it.
Yeah, which is, it's effective in a lot of cases. You can definitely use it, especially if you have that molten core, but it is kind of a cheese thing. Effective teams are going to be able to do pretty good against countering that. And the only one bad side of that is obviously people kind of expect it if they see you running Torbjorn, that it's going to be on the turret. So it's just one thing to consider. It's maybe not the best idea. I mean, if you have good knowledge of the map and the layout and the route that you're going to be taking, just, usually probably want to pick just a high area around where the payload's going to be moving and just move your turret quite often. I mean, again, as we said, level 2 is where it's going to be at for the most point. Unless you have that molten core, you won't have level 3, and it only takes about 5 swings to get it there. So
yeah, I think it's interesting and fun to think about future maps and other moving components of the map, and I'm sure in the future we'll see some very interesting things.
Right, and so that's one thing to talk about too, because we have had some of the maps having moving objects on it, and I'm sure that we will see more of that in the future. So definitely interesting to think about how that turret and how Torbjorn could actually be more prevalent later on.
I'm sure Blizzard's thinking about that. We're not seeing much Torbjorn. Let's build a level where maybe he'll be good.
I just remember from the initial BlizzCon when they announced Overwatch and they actually showed Torbjorn turret on the payload and how they talked about how overpowered that was in internal testing, or the Bastion on the turret and stuff. So, it's just one of those things where, they're definitely thinking about things like that, and I'm sure we will see more of that in the future.
Right, and another thing to keep in mind is the armor packs, right? So obviously you want to communicate with your team. It does, it makes a huge impact if you're pretty much giving, most of the time your entire team 75 armor. And like we said, that's even better than regular health. And it just communicate with, let them know where the armor is at. Look out for your supports, especially.
Right.
It makes a big difference. It's like the difference between getting one shot or not one shot. And also keep in mind that if you're retreating and you're getting under heavy gunfire, you could actually put the armor packs at your feet. So pretty much you're continually kind of giving yourself 75 armor. And consume them like that if you need to, just to stay alive.
Right, and like we said, it's interesting because it is armor, so it's different from health, but it actually applies to your character as health, but it gets taken away first. So you can't be killed even if you're at super low health and you get that 75 until they go through that shield or that armor. They're not going to be able to kill you. There are certain games where you can have armor on and the armor's just added to the health, and even if they kill your health, even with that armor, you'll die.
With some armor.
Right, but this game, it doesn't work like that at all. They have to go through the armor first. So like you said, if you're running away, as long as you have if you have a full 200 scrap, you could just constantly be putting those down and healing yourself. As well as if you're in a defensive position and you have your healer, say your Mercy or somebody, or your Zenyatta right next to you, it's great to be able to let them know, hey, I have a full thing of scrap. If we get into a rough spot, I can pop it down. Just make sure you consume it, and you'll stay alive and just keep me alive. And it works really good on defense.
Yeah. So pretty much, play to your strengths. Obviously, depending on your opponent, obviously you have a strength of both your primary and alternate fire, so you could kind of take advantage of that, right? So if your opponent is, a close quarters like a Reaper, obviously you go further away, and vice versa, right? So if you go up against someone who's more like a Hanzo or something, you could kind of run at him and start right-clicking him. So you kind of have that little advantage as well. Try to enforce the encounters at certain distances. Obviously, you have the turret. You kind of want to be around your turret. When you're fighting, you kind of want that turret to be there backing you up and, hitting the same people you're hitting.
Yeah, and the other thing that I just kind of thought about, like you mentioned with putting down, dropping armor at your feet, like we mentioned before with the scrap and the armor, I believe it does hang around for about a minute or so, which it doesn't seem like a lot of time, but in the heat of battle, a minute can be quite a long time. So if you see that Reaper or someone rushing towards you, you can actually pre-drop that armor and just be aware of it and have it relatively quickly during like a fight or something. So that's definitely another thing you can do.
I know the armor stays around for a while. I was trying to think if it disappears once you reach a certain max amount that's on the ground, or if it actually is time-based, or maybe both. But I know you could have like a lot of armor packs, maybe like 10 or even more.
Yeah, I think there's a limit both on time and amount that you can have, but I think it's pretty much like a full 200. Like we said, it really does take 50 armor. So, you can put quite a few out there if you have a good supply.
I just remember testing it out in the little practice range, just tons of armor everywhere, and there definitely is a limit, but it's pretty high, so you don't really have to worry about running out of max armor on the ground. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So yeah, you can pre-drop that for you and your healers and just keep you alive on a point and such. So yeah, it's definitely something that you can look out for. Yeah, so I think that pretty much covers Torbjorn. He has a lot of little subtle things, right? You have 3 different levels of the turrets, and you have your ultimate, and then you have your primary alternate attack. You have a little hammer. You cannot repair bastions, though. Keep in mind,
Don't we all wish
it's the other turret.
The case,
the other
right?
turret, yeah. Not all turrets. Only the one you built.
I just imagine somebody going up to the enemy bastion and like hitting with the hammer.
Yeah, it is a blue lighting core. That's where it needs a lot of repair.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, it's definitely a lot of little subtle things, but I think really the main thing to keep in mind with Torbjorn is your placement of your turret and your placement as well. Similar with a lot of other characters, placement and your positioning is 90% of the battle.
Yeah, because you're pretty much, premeditating, okay, where's the next team fight going to be? Where's the most advantageous spot for my turret? And yeah.
yeah, you want to consider, the other enemies and what they're running, and whether you think they have their ultimates or if they just use their ultimate, and obviously playing around that. So a lot of little subtle things, but I think that's going to pretty much do it for Torbjorn. And I guess that's going to do it for us for this show. So thank you guys so much for listening, and we will see you next week. And again, please don't forget, message us any insights or ideas you might have.
Right, yeah. So if you have any ideas or anything you want us to cover in particular in the strategy segment, we'd love to hear from you. And again, this show is brought to you by Two Moon Studios, and you can contact us at aheroeswelcomepodcast@gmail.com, and we're also on Twitter at Two Moon Studios. Those will both be in the description or the link below, however you're getting this podcast. And thank you again so much for listening, and to all those that have reached out to us. And we'll see you next week. Till next time.
Till next time.